We're excited to be joined by an actor who has graced both the stage and the screen, most notably alongside Daniel Day-Lewis in My Beautiful Laundrette. It is Gordon Warnecke, who will be in conversation with Guy Armitage, founder of Zealous. Please welcome them to the stage.
Gordon, thank you so much for coming today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I have a very long list of achievements that you've had so far. So you've obviously worked with the Royal Shakespeare Company, the Royal Court, but you've also had a long list of television credits, including Boone, Doctor Who, Only Fools and Horses, EastEnders and The Bill. And you're a bit of a sex symbol with regards to the Beautiful Laundrette and Daniel Day-Lewis. I wanted to start with the beginning. I thought it'd be great to just find out about how you got into acting first. Yeah, absolutely.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know about the sex symbol. That was a long time ago. Acting, same as a lot of actors, I suppose. I was pretty rubbish at school, but I enjoyed drama. And I wanted to be a journalist, but couldn't get the qualifications to go on to university, and I'm glad I didn't. So I went on drama school for 2 years, and which was a great time. And then left there and went and did theatre and education up in Rochdale, working with a company called M6, where we did plays for young people, which dealt with various issues such as globalisation and basically fairly political issues. And we got the kids to interact in some of the plays that we did, and it was a very rewarding time. And I kind of look back at it as a really good way of performing with kids, because they can see straight through you, and you can't lie to them. And that was a very, very important time, I think, for me as an actor, to learn about being real.
And you mentioned political issues with children. Obviously, that must be quite a hard topic to bring forward. Was there a particular way of you interacting with children, or did you interact with them like they were adults and just expected them to kind of understand the subject matter?
Well, the way we structured it was we kind of allowed them to make their own decisions, and we as a company would get from A to Z or whatever. We knew where we had to get to by the end of the play, but we let the kids tell us what to do, and they got totally engrossed in the play. For an example, we did a play called Nice Enough to Eat, which was about the Americans taking over areas of land in South America and employing the locals to produce bananas. Simple as that. So half the kids would work for the multinational, and half the kids would work for us. And obviously a lot goes on, and towards the end of the play, the kids had to decide whether or not they wanted to get rid of the Americans or keep the Americans. And they could see the harm that it had done to the people who lived in that country, using insecticides and being paid very, very poorly. But at the end of the day, it was up to the kids. So it was structured, but it was an emotional reaction we got from the kids. We didn't make them decide in whatever way, it came from them.
And how did you go from, obviously, sort of politics with children to the screen and the stage?
Money, really. It was... I think in that time, back in the 80s, there were a lot of so-called left-wing companies or companies with so-called left-wing views. It was a different time then than it is from now. Although we are still very political, obviously. In those days, you had a lot of, there was a lot of strikes and stuff going on. There was a whole thing about banning the bomb and so on, and everybody seemed to be much more politically active. And there seemed to be a lot more theatre companies who were involved in those politics, but not kind of hardcore, but just trying to bring these out into theatre, into teaching children. I'm not so sure that exists anymore.
I think that's very interesting because it's obviously one of the many themes that's covered within My Beautiful Laundrette. You have the socialists, the fascists,
Yeah.
obviously almost a template of that particular era.
Yeah.
Is that something that attracted you to the role, or was it something else that brought you on board? Or
No, I mean, I'd never done any film before, so I don't know if any of you have even seen the film, but it was set in 85, 86. And I was seen by the director, Stephen Frears, and I had no kind of preconceptions. It was just a script, and I liked the script. It was a love story between two guys, one played by myself and the other played by an actor, Daniel Day-Lewis. I don't know what happened to him, but the two characters fall in love and they run a laundrette. Outside of that relationship, there's a lot of stuff going on with my character's family, and so on. So when I read the script, I just thought it was a really good script, and initially it was supposed to be made for television. It went to Edinburgh, and Jeremy, Channel 4, saw it and said it should get a cinematic release. So it was very nice that it actually went out to the cinemas instead of having the one showing on the TV.
and within the film, you actually play, is it a Pakistani descendant?
I played a Pakistani descendant, yes, yeah.
And obviously you're not originally.
No, I was. I'm still alive. I'm actually half South American. My mum was from Guyana, and my father was a white German. So whenever I go for castings, it's always quite fun when they ask me about my Asian ancestry and how tied up I am with Asian, with the Asian community, and they just get a blank face. Really, I'm not proud of it, but I suppose this kind of comes on to what some of these events that you guys are doing. It's that preconception that I think I've always, from casting directors and directors, they automatically assume that you are Asian. And it's like, yeah, I'm part Asian, but I'm as much Asian as I'm German. Or South American, if you like. I went up for EastEnders years ago. It was only 6 episodes. And I probably did everything I could not to land that role. It was back in the days of Julius Smith, who was producing it. And I'd done my lying at auditions, saying, oh yeah, my mum's from such and such part of India, and so she wasn't. She was born in Guyana in South America. Her parents came from India. But I lied a lot to get parts, or gave the impression that I was more Asian than I was. And I was, on this particular audition, I was very, very truthful, and I told them exactly. And then they turned around and said to me, but you do have Asian friends? I went, yes, I do. And then 3 days later, my agent phoned me up and said, I've got the part. And I was like, really? I just did everything not to get it, because unfortunately, and it still goes on now, it's that thing about trying to judge a book by its cover. They just assume that you go home, take your slippers off and sit down and have a nice Indian meal. It's not quite like that, but people do automatically assume that you will know everything to do with India and that you can do an accent and you can speak with a dialect, which my only dialect comes from North London.
Is it the wrong time to mention the fact that you had a quick curry before you came in?
I had a quick curry because there's nothing else to eat apart from ice cream.
In terms of typecasting, you mentioned that's something that's still happening, or is it getting better? Are we moving towards...
It's difficult. Yeah, it is getting better in very slow stages. I think when I started out, it was a lot worse. I mean, everybody was seen... I mean, you had Passage to India, Jewel in a Crown, and it was all of that kind of thing going on. These days, yes, it is getting more diverse, if that's the right word. They are taking more chances. but there's still a stigma attached to the whole casting system. I think it's progressing, but it's just progressing very slowly. I think America's in exactly the same boat as well. Some companies will employ black actors specifically because they're black, which I'm not sure is the right thing. Sometimes casting directors will look at a script and they'll just see a white person in that part, irrespective of the fact that it doesn't actually specify what colour that part is, but they only see it as a white person. That's the hurdle, I think, that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, we saw that with, obviously, the new casting for Hermione. They have a black actress doing the Hermione role,
Yeah.
and one of the things that was very noticeable from that was there was actually no mention of her racial background at all within the books, other than that she had black curly hair.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see the backlash on social media just based on a very simple premise. So it's obviously still there.
Yeah.
Kind of going back towards the acting, what do you feel your toughest role when you've been out there? Because you've had a lot.
I don't know, probably not enough, but I don't know. Acting is, I suppose they're all kind of tough. Probably the toughest one was one called Monkey Bars that I did a couple of years ago. It was a theatre show. It was a verbatim show by a director called Chris Good, who's kind of a bit of avant-garde. And basically what the premise of the show was this. It was done with 6 actors. And before we auditioned, 2 people, Chris Good and a kind of a professor guy who's involved in theatre, went into schools and interviewed 8 to 10-year-olds about subjects. It could be about sweets, it could have been about God, it could have been about the Queen, it could have been about your mum, your dad, and so on. And they had about 400 pages of dialogue that they recorded from the kids. It was amazing. It was like gold dust, hearing what these kids thought about so-and-so. And the director auditioned actors, and 6 of us got the part. We sat down and read this amazing material that these kids talked about. And we whittled it down to about 100 pages and made a 60-minute show. And so, as you probably know, a verbatim show is when you recite the words that the kids have spoken, exactly what they said. You don't add anything, you don't take anything away. If they or they are, or they pause, you have to respect that and keep that in the show. So that was a very tough show. And the idea of the show is the 6 adults in these situations. You could have 2 kids talking about Haribo sweets, but you'd put them in adult situations. So you might be in a pub, or you might be at your workplace, and so on. And we all wore suits. It was an amazing show. It won the Edinburgh First Award and sold out in London. It's one of the proudest things I think I've ever done. Yeah.
So I guess there's a lot of work towards movement, since you can't really control the fact that you need to tell the story the way the child said it. I imagine the rest of your body is the only tool that you have.
Or? The only, yeah, but we just acted like human beings, like adults. There was no way that we were going to try and imitate the kids, and we weren't allowed to hear the kids' recordings either. We could only read what they said and was transcribed onto the page.
Very interesting process to actually take a story that's told to you by a child and then
then putting it into, amazing.
And in terms of storytelling, another thing that you're doing is you direct short films. You directed a film called The Magician, and you've actually just directed a new one, and I'm going to try and say it properly, but it's Peas Head. Right?
Pez Head.
Pez Head.
Pez Head. Yeah, I've kind of moved. No, I'm not moving away from directing. I shouldn't say that in case my agent turns up. But I've got behind the camera for the last 3 or 4 years. I'm still acting, but I've been directing more and more, investing a bit of money into it and a lot of time. So I've just directed a film which we hope we're going to be in time for the Edinburgh Film Festival in the next couple of weeks. So we're just finishing it now. It's called Pez Head. It's written by a guy called Paul Cesar, and it's about a guy who has a a medical disorder. He shoots water from his nose, and he can't find love in London. And it's about the story about him trying to find love in London with this weird affliction, and he has to go to Paris to a seminar, and he meets the girl of his dreams. That's the film in a nutshell, so keep an eye out on that. It's called Pez Head. Yeah.
Nice. And did you notice a different way of looking at story as a director and as an actor? And obviously you've been on stage.
No, well, yeah, I suppose it's... I think I say a lot of the best directors are actors or were actors. I don't know how true that is. On set, you definitely have an understanding working with actors because you're one yourself. So you see their insecurities and when they're not sure about things, and you kind of relate to that and you try and bring the performance out of them. As far as me and the directing goes, I saw this script and really liked it. I could see the images straight away, and I said, yeah, I want to do this. So it just depends if it grabs you.
And in terms of, I think it's the 30th anniversary of My Beautiful Laundrette. Not that I want to put an age to you or anything, but how has the industry changed in that time? Is there something in particular that you've noticed that's, in terms of being an actor, is there?
I don't know. I suppose it has changed. Like everything changes. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. I don't know. The money's got worse, especially in TV. There's a lot more people out there. There's a lot more loopholes. There's a lot more reality shows, which means a lot of programs aren't being made because the companies are finding a cheap way to make television and thus get a massive audience. Because unfortunately, a lot of people will watch it.
And do you feel that the loopholes are because the UK doesn't have a unions like in America, or is there?
I don't think it's that. I just think they pander to people's tastes. Listen, they're not going to put anything that's challenging on at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. They're going to put the X Factor on. That's the stuff that gets the press. That's what sells the magazines. And that's what gets people watching.
And you've been part of a cult film, so I imagine you've got this kind of following behind you. And I think we were actually talking, well, yeah, they're lining up actually. We could see them outside.
They're everywhere. Snipers.
But you were discussing the fact that you're still getting mail now and people kind of contact you.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, I mean, it's nice. I mean, Laundrette was a film of its time. It's kind of carried on because at that time when it came out, it dealt with politics, it dealt with homosexuality, it dealt with a lot of issues that weren't really being addressed at that time. Thatcher was in government, and it kind of spoke to people in a way that maybe they hadn't been spoken to before. And even now it's being studied at schools, at unis and so on. So it's had this kind of afterlife. And it's very, very flattering that people still say, oh, great film, etc. And it's nice to have done a piece of work that's lasted.
How does one tell a good story? I mean, a lot of today was about engagement and trying to get people's attention, and I think a lot of people have less attention to give,
yeah.
And that might explain why you've chosen the short film medium as opposed to something a bit longer, or maybe that's to do with financials behind it. But what do you feel is necessary in telling a good story?
Good question. I mean, I'm making short films because I don't have the budget to make big ones. But you can still tell a. I mean, the film that we saw just now, I thought was really, really good, almost brilliant. That told a story. It engaged you straight away, and I've got a film company called One Step Beyond Films. So please check out the website. And our kind of motive is to engage the audience. If the story is strong enough, it doesn't matter if it's 30 seconds or an hour and a half or 2 hours long, as long as you pull the audiences. The producer of the film that I've just done produced a film a few years ago that won the Virgin Shorts called Touch, And it was like a minute and a half. And I was like, at the end of it, I was breathless. It was absolutely amazing. It had probably just as much impact on me as a big feature film I might see at the cinema. It's the material, it's the writing. And if the story's good enough, and then you tell it and you serve that story.
So the medium doesn't matter at all. It's very much just
Yeah,
empathizing with people.
exactly.
And do you have any future projects?
No, just, well, to get this one off the ground.
Okay.
And I'm working with Paul on one or two scripts. One he's written that he'd like me to direct. So we'll see what happens.
I've never been tempted to go into the writing seat because
Yeah, I write a lot.
Okay.
But directing, it kind of takes over. And my time, I just haven't been able to write for over a year. But I've got a stack full of stuff that I want to get off and do. But it's finding the time.
Nice. I think I'm going to leave it there if the audience had any questions in particular. I can't actually see you guys, so if you put your hand up, then I won't be able to tell, hey, that's what I wanted. Now you're in the spotlight, so you've got to ask questions. Does anyone have any questions for our guest?
I want to get home and watch the Arsenal-Liverpool game like me, don't you?
I'm not going to put my sides on that, I don't think. No questions at all? Well, thank you so much, Gordon.
Thank you very much.